Good morning. My name is Nicole, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Barclays Biopharma CEO CFO conference call series. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question at that time, simply press star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad. To withdraw the question, press the pound key. It is now my pleasure to hand the conference over to Mr. Jeff Meacham. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks, operator, and thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is Jeff Meacham. I'm the biopharma analyst here at Barclays. My team's on the phone as well. We have Scott, Greg, Olivia, and Jason. And welcome to our 2019 CEO CFO call series. So this is the first one that we've had, and we're thrilled to have Seattle Genetics. And on the phone with me is Clay Siegall, CEO. Clay, are you there?
I am.
All right, perfect. So the format for these is the same one that we've been doing over the past couple of years. So we'll ask Clay to kick it off, maybe with just a few minutes of prepared remarks, and then we'll get right into questions. And of course, you can email me throughout the call to ask questions, and we'll take some from the phone towards the end. So with that, Clay, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm delighted to speak with you all on the phone. Seattle Genetics had an amazing year last year with 2 frontline approvals, something that we were not necessarily planning. We thought we'd get one, and the second one we thought would come in 2019, but we were approved for E2, which is T-cell lymphoma frontline, in 11 days after submission. So we got approved toward the end of 2018, but we were delighted to get 2 frontline approvals. Looking at 2019, we are really excited to work on drugs and get a lot of progress on drugs that are not named Adcetris. And Adcetris is our flagship drug, and we are working on it still and expanding it, and I'd love to talk about things that we're looking to do to go beyond our 6 labels. But 2019, to me, is the year of amazing things for the company, where we become a multi-product company in broader territories than we've been historically. And we're looking at drugs such as EV, which data will come out soon, tucatinib, and TV. And we have another drug called LV, which is coming up behind those. And so our late-stage pipeline looks full. And we have a very exciting early-stage pipeline, but I'm pretty sure we won't get to it today. And we'll focus on the late-stage pipeline and our commercial efforts, et cetera. But looks to be a very exciting year where we become a multi-product company. I'll turn it back to you, Jeff. Okay.
Thanks, Clay. Yeah, so let's first talk about the E1 first-line Hodgkin's opportunity. And I know you guys had obviously a really nice couple quarters out of the gates once that data came out, and obviously there were controversies on effect size, but the reality is that it did hit the endpoint. You did have a difference in PFS. I wanted to maybe just get an update from you, Clay, about if there's any changes to physician perceptions, or is it more experience with Adcetris in this setting outside of the traditional docs that have used ABVD? What do you think, I guess, could be the tipping point in the first-line Hodgkin's market?
Well, we immediately got taken up by some of the doctors. So there's some doctors that basically said, hey, these data are strong, which they are. The entire program, it hit strong statistical significance in our global study. When we looked at a preset endpoint, which was something we submitted to the FDA, also with North America, the data was even stronger and the gap was even bigger. And a lot of parts of the globe had never used Adcetris when we started this and had to get to learn how to use it. And where North America, they had been using it because it was approved initially in relapse setting in 2011. This study started, way before it was approved in some of the countries we were using it for. So this was their first experience using Adcetris. And like any drug, you just have to know the drug a little bit. So I feel really good about the North American data, good about all the data, but the North American data especially, where there was a more substantial difference even because of the comfort level with using Adcetris. And as we've shown those data, a lot of docs in the U.S. really like that data. The other thing which was really helpful is, and we showed this at last year's ASH, was the age data. So as the data ages, the Kaplan-Meier curves actually are looking even better because the treated arms are basically flat, and the control arm, if you will, that had the standard regimen continues to have slight tick downward. Very slight because it's Hodgkin lymphoma and chemotherapy works well there, but the delta over time is improving. And we don't know for sure that that will continue to happen, but we will continue to follow the data, age the data, and present it at, for instance, at ASH conferences and show this age data. And because, like, if I was really being analytical on our data and really pressing hard on it, what I could say if I'm a doctor is, look, you have great data and you're looking at PFS, but what about OS? And a doctor could say that. Whereas with E2 and frontline T-cell lymphoma, we have PFS and OS. And we will have OS come time. OS was always prescribed to be based on a number of events, which we predict will be, 3 or 4 years from our original data. And so that will come. And the trend for OS was very much in our favor, which is the best you could say until you have the appropriate N that we agreed upon with regulators. We just haven't had that many deaths, when I say events. So we're doing great with that. It is maturing, but as docs see our age data and they see the line staying flat, that's akin to survival, and they appreciate that. So I think with time we'll continue to get more and more docs that will use the regimen. We are expanding our doctors that use it, so we can measure how many docs use ABVD, the old regimen, and we can measure the docs that are using the new regimen, and we are getting more and more docs. So I think our original thought was that we would, hit peak in some time point, but I think it's just going to take a little longer to hit peak than we initially thought. It's just a little bit slower ramp, probably because the standard of care worked pretty well. It was used for 41 years before our new approval, and we don't yet have OS, but with time, our data continues to improve.
And Clay, with more mature data over time for E1, does that play out, for example, in publications or in guidelines, or what can you do with that besides just sort of update the docs over the course of, say, several ASH meetings?
Yeah, both. Thank you for asking that. We are certainly working with the guidelines committees, and they request information, and we provide information and packages to them. It's different from the FDA, so we have less ability to work with them. Guidelines committees, have a life of their own and their own vote, and so that's something that we you just have to provide the data that they request, and hopefully they continue to improve the way they put their guidelines out. And I think that we have an excellent chance of continuing to improve in guidelines. I think our data, as it's maturing, is strong, and I think that there are people on the guidelines committee that would like to see Etcetras continue to be used by all docs in frontline Hodgkin lymphoma, and I think that they're making hay on that and pushing hard, and so I feel good about the future of it. It's just going to take a little more time to get up to the ramp and the peak than we originally would have, we originally thought or predicted. It's just, you live and learn, and this is where we are now. We've been talking about that, what we're doing. The data is on our side, though, and the data is on our side. Our sales reps have the best data. Nobody has better data in frontline Hodgkin lymphoma than we do. And, quite frankly, there's really not a good rationale not to use the Etcetras regimen in frontline Hodgkin lymphoma. You're going to get a higher long-term disease-free response rate of probably 7% better based on the data and as it's maturing. And you don't have bleomycin, which causes so much toxicity. And not just, initially with lung toxicity, but long-term toxicity that comes out later. And doctors really don't want to deal with that. It's kind of amazing when we talk to doctors. Some docs are like, gee, I do well with ABVD, why switch? But once they see a patient have some pretty severe toxicity due to bleomycin, they come on to the Adcetris regimen and never go back. Not that I want them to, not that I want a lot of patients to have this toxicity, but it's once a doctor sees it once, they just switch. And it's not a high, I think it's, about 1% of patients have a very severe bleomycin toxicity. Some die. And about 7% have a pretty strong toxicity, but not a lethal one. And then about 25% of patients have toxicity that appears later. And so it's a pretty big amount that comes out, but the doctors see the immediate one. They don't see the 25 years later one much because they go to different doctors to get treated. They don't go to oncologists to get treated for the. But I think we have a great story, and with time, we'll get more and more docs.
And when you think about earlier stage 1, 2 Hodgkin's patients, it's obviously it is another piece of the market. I mean, do you see a lot of off-label use? Like, are there opportunities to capture that? I know to run a study in that population would take even longer to focus on that, right? It's just it's much slower developing of a disease.
Yeah, we have